Today I'm going to be discussing the Diablo 4 new skill tree controversy. So, for those who don't know, Lord of Hatred launched a few weeks ago and introduced the much anticipated skill tree rework. Um, and a little bit of a caveat preface to this video. I'm very late to the party on this topic. Whenever I was playing the game, I was very tunnel vision. I wasn't looking at anything online. Somebody mentioned this to me the other day, and I was like, "Oh wow, I didn't even know that was happening." So, took a couple of days to kind of go over what I was seeing, some of the things that, some of the points I was seeing being raised about the game, and making a video now to just talk about it. So, for those that may not know what I'm talking about, in the new skill tree, you have three different variants. And in the base game, without the expansion, you have access to two. And then in the if you have the expansion, you have access to the third one. So another quick note here. This isn't the first time this has happened. Blizzard themselves have even done this in other games. World of Warcraft, like if you were upgrading from Burning Crusade to like Wrath of Lich King, you get the level cap increase, access to new skills, so on and so forth. This is this is a theme that comes up in games. It's not new. So with that being said, why are people upset about it? So a few reasons, and I've outlined the ones that I think are the most important. There are tons of reasons people get mad at Blizzard, but as it pertains to this, Diablo 4 combines multiple monetization structures. And another one that I think is pretty important here is people weren't expecting this, and I actually include myself in that group of people because when I was covering this game, up until its launch, their promotional material was kind of confusing about the skill tree. At least in my opinion, when I was reading it, I was like, is this base game? Like, what does this entail? I remember the first video I made, I was talking about it, and I remember like in that video, I stopped at the skill tree part of like the promotional material, and it was either like omitted or it was only like the way that they were communicating it felt a little off to me. But in the same token, I remember watching the live streams, and they were like, "Yeah, this is coming to as part of the base game, so people that don't have the expansions have something to look forward to." I remember that explicitly being said. So I was also in this group of people that were kind of confused by this. Kind of circling back to the monetization structure, you buy the base game, you buy your expansions, you have the option of buying battle passes and in-game cosmetics if you want to. I mean, the expansions are also technically optional, but you're not having the same experience. Obviously, I mean, that's not like a good or a bad thing. It's just an obvious statement. But given all of this, this changes how people are going to react to expansion gated gameplay, specifically gameplay, not content like new area or like new items or anything like that, like gameplay specifically, like something that's just should be inherently part of the game. So I think it's important that we talk about the monetization structure specifically. And this is kind of something that I've always thought about with these games and was going to make a video about this eventually. So, now's a better time than any. So Path of Exile. Path of Exile is free to play. You can download and play Path of Exile, all the way through the campaign into the end game, and you don't have to spend a dime. Now, you can buy cosmetics, stash tabs, hideouts, skill effects, all that stuff. And, I will say that like the stash tabs add like such a huge quality of life that, you're kind of, you're not having as good of an experience when you get to like, especially the end game. So a lot of people say that like, I've heard people call Path of Exile free to try because of the stash tab. I think that's going a little bit too far in my personal opinion. I do think that it inhibits your experience pretty substantially when it comes to like inventory management. But the barrier to entry, the cost barrier to entry on like getting a stash tab bundle just for like a little bit of a little bit of quality of life, like it pales in comparison to like spending $70 on a game. So, but important to note. Um, last Epic has a $40 box price. You can buy cosmetics, battle passes, skill effects, and I left this out. I forgot to add this in. They are kind of moving more towards the expansion themed monetization structure that Diablo 4 is currently utilizing. But they are implementing some like good faith measures. Like if you already own the game, then the expansion is free. I could be wrong about that. I did as much fact checking as I could, but I think that's the case. So two examples here. So now Diablo 4 monetization. So this is $70 for the base game. That's the current price. If you look it up on Steam, this comes with Lord of Hatred and Vessel of Hatred. But that doesn't include like if you bought the game and you've bought, maybe you bought Vessel of Hatred, and you haven't bought Lord of Hatred yet. Maybe you just have the base game. So if you've done it like me, you bought the base game, you've bought Vessel of Hatred, then you bought Lord of Hatred. So that's $150. You have tiered versions of the games. Now, this also exists in Last Epic. It's like 40, 60, 40, 50, 60. I can't remember the exact, but in this, it's like $70 for the base game, 90 for like the exceptional, and then like 110 for the ultimate. And it's just in-game cosmetics. It's not like anything power related. And then you have season passes, like $15 to $30. I think because you can get like the base version for like it's like $10, I think technically, because I think the base version is 1,000 platinum, and then you can get like the ultimate one, which is like either $20 or $30. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like somewhere in the range of like $10 to $25 for the season passes. And then on top of that, you have the in-game cosmetics that you can just straight up buy with the platinum here. And I think based off of what I've seen, they usually run around this price metric here. So about $25 for an in-game cosmetic. And sometimes they're more expensive. Sometimes they're a little bit less. So my opinion, the frustration is definitely warranted. So I think the biggest thing here is that there was either, a miscommunication or poor marketing. It's led to a lot of people being confused about this. Like I said, myself included, because I remember looking at the promotional material. I remember watching the videos on it, and it seemed like they were talking about the skill tree. The way they were talking about the skill tree was like this was for everybody. That being said, I'm not surprised that this was an aspect. I just think that it just didn't come across clearly how they marketed it. So obviously the surprise restriction for people that either didn't read it properly, didn't understand it, maybe they didn't, communicate it properly, but it's led to a surprise feeling when they see that. And that's, of course, creating the frustration. This part here is kind of like the more the thing for me that makes these types of things a little bit more annoying is the monetization fatigue. And what I mean by that is, every time you're playing the game, you're constantly being prompted for ways that you can spend more money on the game. With the season passes, like, oh, look at the new cosmetics, and I get it, like, it's a company, you got to make money, all that, but like I displayed in these other games, like the way they go about it, it's just completely different. And seeing the contrast, and then when you have like a paywalled experience based thing happen, it kind of makes you take a step back and look at all of these things happening. It's like, okay, you're utilizing all of these things to make money, and now like you're just implementing it as like part of experiencing the game. Now, a lot of people have said different things about this. I've seen people have varying opinions on it, both I wouldn't say in support of Blizzard, but more just like in support of the notion of or having people pay for more content. I think that it just leaves a bad taste in in my mouth and in a lot of consumers' mouths when there's all these layered monetization methods, and then having an extra layer of monetization be embedded in the skill tree. I think it just feels bad. Um, so and just kind of circling back to like this miscommunication thing. Um, you know, the transparency of it, I think, was off. So this is obviously kind of lending to that. You know, the more elevated reaction from some people. So, final thoughts. I'm not saying that Diablo 4 is a bad game because of this. I'm not saying the developers are evil or intentionally making the game this way. This is probably like a marketing thing. Like, hey, like guys, like you gotta, we have to entice people to buy the expansion. People that are coming back to play. Like there needs to be these things every so often, every so many frames that entice people to buy the expansion, and that leads to them like designing the game in a certain way. And this is a thing that is what it is. If you have a corporate game, you're just gonna have, or if you have a game that's influenced by like marketing from like a corporate environment, like you're just gonna get stuff like this. So it's not like I'm upset that it is this way. It's well, I guess it is kind of like I'm upset that it is this way because it is just that way. If you have games like this, but um, the last point I want to make here is, even if it is just this way, even if that's just the way of the world, we as consumers need to let people know or let companies know when there's a certain thing that they're doing is upsetting to us. And I think this is a good opportunity for one of those things. This is something that people didn't like. I didn't like it. And a lot of people felt that way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with coming out and saying like, hey, I don't like you paywalling this specific thing. You can do the in-game cosmetics. You can do certain expansion locked features like the new area and the set bonuses, which I will say are much more powerful than like these skill tree variations. But we can step up and say like, hey, like we don't like this type of monetization structure. And they may or may not listen, but you can always speak up about it. So I thought I had a last slide, but I don't. Interesting to hear people's thoughts. If you're going to get on here and say like, just if you're broke, just say so. Like, don't bother. That those types of comments are ridiculous. I saw that type of discourse on some of the forums. I think that's a really silly way to go about having a discussion like this. It goes both ways though. So like, don't be rude to each other if you do have this opinion. But I'm curious to hear people's thoughts. Yeah, just let me know how you feel. See you next time.